Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, thanks so much for being here. My name is Jess. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a Brazilian person with light skin and red hair, wearing black glasses and a burgundy blouse. I'm an assistant professor of data science, and I also co-lead the Digital Technology for Democracy lab at the University of Virginia that we call DTD Lab. It's shorter. And together with my colleague Yasmin Curzi, who is here, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the DTG Lab and an assistant professor of law at FGV in Brazil, we're organizing the Gender and Tech Online Talk series with the goal of discussing how gender shapes and is shaped by technologies with perspectives from the global majority. And we want to bring together scholars, practitioners, and advocates to explore how the work we do can help advance democracy and human rights. And today we are hosting the third session of the talk series, focusing on platform governance. And together with our colleagues Julie Owana and Coleen Carrigan, we'll discuss how structure inequalities shape big tech, terms of service, community standards, content moderation, and the accountability of digital platforms. And so our hope is that this community can serve as a space to collectively reflect on and resist the techno-authoritarian logics spreading globally. And so just for information, the next one will be next month, September 29th, and it's about techno-capitalism and environmental justice at 11 a.m. as usual, Eastern Standard Time. And you have another talk in October and another one in November. We'll be exploring other topics such as like gender identity and social participation politics. The exact dates will vary, but it will always be in the last week of the month. And please consider subscribing to the DTG Lab newsletter to stay up to date with the upcoming talks. And in early 2026, we'll launch a report based on the webinar topics and this current research project. And so for today, we know English is not the first language of many of us, so feel free to ask questions in Portuguese, Spanish, and French. We'll do our very best to translate and help you. And you can use the Q&A feature located in the bar, usually at the bottom of the screen, to ask your questions. And automatic closed captions are also available if you need that. And this recording will be available in the next couple of days in our YouTube channel. So thanks again for being here. And next we'll hear from Yasmin Curzi, who will be moderating this conversation today. Thanks, everyone.
Hi and welcome everyone. My name is Yasmin Curzi. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a Latina woman with light skin, brown hair, brown eyes, wearing a black sport coat and a white t-shirt. It's a pleasure to moderate the conversation here today on platform governance. As Jess said before, the series aims to center feminist, queer, and the global majority perspectives in the debate on technology, democracy, and human rights. Today's session will focus on platform governance and how it shapes freedom of expression, labor, accountability, and how structural inequalities are embedded in the rules and infrastructures of digital platforms. So we are honored to have here with us today these two brilliant speakers whose work has profoundly shaped these debates, Julie Owonu and Coleen Carrigan. Julie is a French and Cameroonian lawyer and academic researcher. As of 2021, she serves as executive director of Internet Without Borders and as an inaugural member of the Facebook's Independent Oversight Board, now Meta Oversight Board. She's affiliated with leading academic centers at the intersection of business, human rights, and artificial intelligence. Julie's also received her master's degree in international law from Sorbonne Law School. She has worked as a blogger for Global Voices and an opinion columnist for Al Jazeera, commenting on the politics of the Gulf of Guinea. And Coleen Carrigan. Coleen is a Copenhaver Associate Professor in the Department of Engineering and Society at the University of Virginia. Using ethnography, her research advances knowledge on the allocation of resources, opportunities, and respect in US engineering, computer science. Professor Coleen Carrigan also participates in interdisciplinary collaborations, committed to justice in science and technology, and holding institutions accountable to democratic values and oversight. She's a recipient of NSF Faculty Early Career Development Award, and also investigates intersections of gender, race, and social values in computing. In 2025, Coleen Carrigan received the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers, and she was also a senior manager in the high-tech industry before on-ramping into academia. Her book, Cracking the Bro Code, is available from MIT Press. So let's begin first with Julie Owono's remarks. Julie, thank you again for accepting our invitation and for being here with us today. Please go ahead when you're ready. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, and thank you very much, Jess, as well as all the Gender in Tech platform governance webinar team that has been extremely kind to us, to invite us and to invite me specifically to talk about a very urgent issue, yet sometimes divisive issue, but I hope we can together identify paths for more appeased conversation about the rights of everyone, and including and especially the rights of women. As Yasmin kindly introduced me, I'm Julie Owono, and I lead Internet Sans Frontières, which is a nonprofit based in Paris. I'm currently not in Paris. I'm currently based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we work to defend freedom of expression and privacy for all. We've worked several years in France, but also in many African countries to make sure that people in that part of the world were not left out from the benefits, the opportunities that internet represented and hopefully still represents. Before I dive into the subject, I always like to share this little personal story. I joined the organization Internet Sans Frontières in 2010 when blogging was an emerging opportunity for a lot of people. And it gave me an opportunity, a voice as a woman, as a Black young woman at the time. I'm still young, but I was younger at the time. A Black young woman whose path was almost, well, living in a foreign country in France at the time, and whose path was almost traced. I was going to be an immigrant, Black immigrant, and probably with less opportunities. Thankfully, life turned differently, and it turned differently, especially thanks to the opportunities that I had blogging at Global Voices, as Yasmin rightly reminded, but also advocating through Internet Sans Frontières for the rights of everyone, really, and making sure that the stories that I was telling could reach people who had potential to act. And I'm glad that, yes, fast forward 15 years now, it's really a privilege and an honor to be able to continue to do that work and continue to spread the voice as much as possible of people who potentially don't have the same opportunities. That being said, I also joined, and I think it's directly related, I also joined the Meta Oversight Board when it was launched at the time it was called the Oversight Board, Facebook Oversight Board, when it was launched in May 2020. I'm sorry. And I will dive further into what we do, but I could generally say that we hold a company, Meta, and particularly its social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. We hold the company accountable for its content moderation decisions. We'll get into that. Before I talk about the work of the Oversight Board and how this work can help us, yes, build the feminist and safe digital world that we all think we deserve, I wanted to first remind us of some of the inequalities that we see in our very offline world and how they are transposed and magnified maybe in the online world. As a reminder, we still live in a world where, according to latest data, the gender gap, the global gender gap, is more than 68%. There's a huge gap between when men and women in terms of opportunities, including professional opportunities, that amount to this huge number. Secondly, we still live in a world where violence against women is normalized. Feminicides, which is not a new word, but a word that is now accepted to describe the act of partner men to kill women simply because they're women. The number of feminicides is reaching heights, and according to latest data, more than close to 100 women in France, for instance, have been killed since the beginning of 2025. We live in a world where this inequalities are transposed and, as I was saying, potentially magnified online. Internet Sans Frontières conducted a survey in 2019. It was a long time ago, according to Digital Time, but I'm sure not much has changed. In 2019, when we surveyed women in 18 countries in West and Central Africa about their experience on social media, and specifically their experience of gender-based violence, whether it's harassment, whether it's sexism, insults. And we found out that more than 45% of these women, young women and women, had experienced online violence. It might seem as anecdotal, and I'm personally convinced that the data was potentially higher, simply that some of us don't even know sometimes that we are experiencing a gender-based violence online. With that being said, and setting the stage with all these rather grim reminders, I am of those who are resolutely optimistic. I am of those who have benefited really from the amount of knowledge that is available online. I am of those who were educated thanks to the humongous resources that are now freely accessible on the internet. I discovered writings about what being a woman means. I discovered writings about why being a woman is also being entitled to human rights. It might seem weird to say this, but unfortunately, we live in a world where sometimes we have to doubt whether or not we're all equal in front of the exercise of our rights. And so, faced with that number, with the number of inequalities in the offline world and also inequalities in the online world, we ask ourselves what to do. One way to do that, to work to find solutions and to build this equal and safe world for everyone, an inclusive world for everyone online and also offline. Activism has been one of the responses that I've personally found. Activism through Internet Sans Frontières, making sure that all voices counted when it came to accessing the internet, expressing oneself on the internet, making sure that policymakers, governments, technology companies are aware of the important messages, the important needs for women to feel safe online, as everyone else should be able to feel safe online. And also, aside from Internet Sans Frontières, joining the oversight board, realizing that this was also an opportunity to potentially also impact more systemically on the platforms that are owned by a company, and in this case, Meta. To speak specifically to that, because I think it's complementary, at least in my experience, the activism that we do, the research that we conduct, because I also conjoined my research work with my activism work. All of this is deeply interconnected with the ability to impact the platforms and the technologies that we all use and women specifically use. And I joined the oversight board specifically to do that, to kind of link also the activism that I was doing with the ability to work directly with technology companies and platforms. I think this is a great opportunity to tell a little bit more about what the oversight board is and what it does. So it's a board independent body, not led by Meta in any way, but instead led by a group of 21 personalities from around the world, coming from different backgrounds. As I said myself, I come from the activist background, leading Internet Sans Frontières, but we have, and also I have my colleague Nighat Dad, who some of you might know, who leads the Digital Rights Foundation in Pakistan. But we also have colleagues coming from journalism background, thinking about my colleague Andy Bayouni, who used to lead, who was the editor-in-chief of the Jakarta Post, thinking about my colleague Alan Versbridger, who used to lead The Guardian, the editor-in-chief of The Guardian. But of course, also the political work, thinking about my colleague Helle Thorning-Schmidt, who's also one of the co-chairs of the Oversight Board, who used to be the Prime Minister of Denmark and was actually the first woman Prime Minister of the country. Coming from all these different backgrounds, we come together to think about some of the most difficult issues facing the company when the company Meta has to balance freedom of expression with other imperatives, whether they are safety imperatives, commercial imperatives sometimes too, and so on and so forth. And we do this by taking cases, appeals from users and also from the company itself. Appeals on content that was left up or content that was taken down. And we choose, well, we receive a lot of appeals. We've received more than 2 million to this date since we started operating in 2021. So obviously 21 of us cannot address all the 2 million plus cases that we've received since we've started. But instead, what we do is we set criteria to select cases that can have the most impact. First of all, cases that ask difficult questions, and also cases that have the ability to impact beyond the individual case. So cases that touch on an issue that is faced in different other contexts. So we choose those cases, and we a panel of usually 5 board members will draft a first draft of a decision, and then we'll share it with the rest of the group so that each of us can have the opportunity to provide perspectives on the resolution of the case. But before we get to the resolution of the case, we also have the ability to hear directly from stakeholders. And I want to insist on that because it goes back to what I was saying earlier about linking the different work that we do, whether it's research, whether it's activism, and also linking it with the important decision-making when it comes to content moderation. We can hear directly from stakeholders through the public comment feature that we have at the board. For each case, we have an open window of usually 15 days, could be more for more complex cases. 15 days in which each one of us, whether you're a Facebook user or the leader of a nonprofit or also international organization, we've had submissions from international organizations as well. Those stakeholders can provide the board with additional context, with their perspective on the important issues that should be dealt with in the specific case that we're looking at. And also sometimes, yes, share recommendations that they think could potentially impact not only this case, but also the broader issues that we're trying to address through the case. And I'm insisting on this feature because it's really one of the features that provides the board with so much knowledge and elements really to put together, to bring together when we're making recommendations to the company. Because yes, once we have done this, when we've, deliberated after reading public comments, after reading also research from our own teams about the context of a specific case, once we have deliberated, we then publish our case, publish the decision. And what's interesting with the decisions is that one aspect is binding. So the specific case is the decision that we make about the specific case, the specific content is binding to the company. And then we can also make recommendations. The recommendations are non-binding, but the company must respond to them, usually in a framework of 60 days. And it's interesting also, I call this the open dialogue between the oversight board and the company. This open dialogue is extremely fascinating because this is where you learn sometimes very interesting information about the operations of the company when it comes to addressing specific policy difficulties. And it's interesting because the company has a transparency center in which they publish different information about, transparency reports, obviously, and also about generally enforcement of their community standards. And what is interesting is that the recommendations that the oversight board makes are accessible on this platform. They're also accessible on the oversight board website, which I invite everyone to visit when you have a moment. Thank you. But these recommendations are available on the company's transparency. I think it's transparency.meta.com. And the responses of the company to those recommendations are also available. And I wanted to talk about some of the recommendations that we've made and how the company has responded, which speak directly to what we talk about. One of the very first cases that we made was very feminist. It was a case coming from Brazil in which a campaign about breast cancer, an awareness campaign about breast cancer, images from this campaign were taken down. I'm sure you imagine why they were taken down. We talk about female breast, and God forbid, female breast. And when you advocate for awareness on breast cancer, sometimes you have to show female breast and specifically the female nipple. And everybody, I'm sure here, or everybody's familiar with feminism, feminist issues online, is aware that there are adult nudity policies that prevent from showing some parts of the human body, including female nipple. And so we recommended the company. Well, it was interesting because at the time, the company did have a carve out for raising awareness on breast cancer, did not apply this carve out in in this case, and therefore took down the campaign. So we recommended the company to ensure that it applies this carve out, and specifically recommended that even when using automated detection of images, to make sure that the context could be understood by a human, preferably, to make sure that such campaign would not be taken down. We also recommended in other cases related to deepfakes, we touch on issues that directly interest this conversation. We recommended that for deepfakes, the company does not only see this as, so first of all, we recommended that the company, by design, by default, understands that deepfake equals non-consent, so that the assumption be reversed of if an intimate image, a deepfaked intimate image of a woman is available online, the default assumption should be that the person never consented for this to be online. And so by changing this initial assumption, it leads to, hopefully in the sense, and based on recommendations that we've also received from experts, it leads the company to potentially by default consider this as a content that is not allowed on its platform. We also recommended that the deepfake, well, at least policies that are applied to deepfake, not only imply bullying and harassment, but also adult sexual exploitation, which are two very serious policies and community standards, and usually lead to a different consideration, looking at the content from a different eye. And so I'm sharing these examples to share that in many of the recommendations that the board has made have been accepted by the company, and even when the company does not explains that it will not implement a recommendation, it will provide additional context with regards to why it cannot go further with regards to one recommendation. I'm very interested in hearing more from you, so I'll stop there for now. But this is globally a presentation of how connecting activism, research, and decision making when it comes to content moderation, how connecting all of these can potentially ensure that a company like Meta decides to make systemic policy changes that systemically impact the experience on its platforms, especially the experience for women and girls and LGBTQI plus publics. I'll stop there for now. Thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Julie, for your presentation and for all your trajectory advocating for women's and minorities' rights in social media platforms, including in your position at the Meta Oversight Board. It's really important to have people who are who take this responsibility and take their advocacy into these spaces and actually work on changing the companies from outside with this pressure as well. So thank you so much for both your talk and for your trajectory doing all of this for us as well. Now we're going to move to Coleen's presentation. This part of the discussion is not going to be recorded, so I apologize in advance for the people who are going to watch this on YouTube, but for privacy reasons, we're not going to record this part. Coleen, please go ahead. Thank you so much, Coleen, for this powerful talk and for all your investigations also on these topics. I'm very much looking forward to reading your new book as well. So now let's open the floor for the Q&A. I don't know if the recording's already started. Yeah, it's already started again. Let's open the floor for the Q&A. If you have any questions for us, please add them to the chat here on the section Q&A to the audience that is here with us. If not, there isn't any questions right now. I wanted to use my moderator's powers here to first start with the question for both of you. So given the structural inequalities of gender and intersectionalities, other intersectionalities that affect the STEM field and all the structural inequalities that are embedded in the current platforms ecosystem, what alternatives do you see for us? Do you think that, for example, interoperability could be a way of moving forward for more human rights standards within the human rights within the community standards, and to push for more democratic platform governance at all? Or do you have any other thoughts on how we could develop more the platform ecosystem in general? So I will start first with Julie and then go to Coleen. And I see that we already have a question from Paloma Otero also in the chat. So, but let's start with this. It's okay for you, Julie? Can you go
Yes,
first?
yes,
Okay,
very
go
happy to.
ahead.
Thank you, Yasmin. And apologies, I went ahead first. So on that question about it's basically yes, how to ensure systemic impact of the work that is being done with regards to governance and accountability. I would like to share that obviously the decisions and the work that, and I'll focus on the oversight board because that's the only example that exists to date of an independent body that can make decisions that are binding to a tech company. The decisions that we make, of course, concern one company, but it is true that when we draft our opinions, we of course think about the industry. Meta is not an isolated tech company. It evolves in an ecosystem. And what we have seen in our experiences and what we also have learned is that the opinions that we publish are inspirational also to other companies. And that is, I think, one quite novel and surprising aspect of the work that we do that I found out. And that is why I was insisting on the importance for us at the Oversight Board of the stakeholder engagement, because it's really through our stakeholder engagement that we are able to get this 360-degree view on the different solutions to a specific issue, to a specific problem, tech policy problem, or content moderation policy issue. So is that a form of interoperability? Probably in the sense of rules. We inspire each other. I mean, the different stakeholders inspire each other, and I'm trying as much as possible in my work as board member to continue to be inspired by the work that I do as an activist, and also by the work that others do, other stakeholders that we hear from. The second aspect that I wanted to discuss is, of course, there is a tech interoperability issue. I would love to see the same efforts that companies have dedicated to addressing terrorist content available on different platforms. I would love to see the same type of effort, level of effort from the tech companies when it comes to anti-feminist content, and specifically, of course, technology facilitated sexist content or anti-feminist content. So that's one aspect. But I would also like to raise the importance of the role of another stakeholders, which are governments. Tech companies were compelled to address terrorist content because there are countless laws about terrorist online content, which can be discussed, and it is discussed, but at least there is tone of rules, regulation addressing this. When it comes to feminist content, I think we're potentially evolving there, but it's not it was not an urgent issue until recently for many of the other stakeholders, including government stakeholders. So I think it's also the role of governments to take a stand and say, we are against anti-feminism. We want to protect women. We know in France, for instance, the right to abortion was enshrined in the Constitution. I think it's a strong message from this country about how much they care about the women's rights to decide for themselves. And so it's in the Constitution. It applies to everybody else in the society. So I'll stop there, but I would love to see this tech interoperability from a technical perspective when it comes to anti-feminist and anti-women and anti-minority content. Thank you.
That's really good, Julie. Thank you so much. Coleen, do you have any answers for that?
Well, I mentioned a few things that I'm concerned about, and I've been advocating now for my entire career, since I left big tech, to advocate for, similar to what Julie's advocating for governments to take a more regulatory stand, very firm regulatory stand that is protective of people who have been historically disenfranchised from leadership roles in our society. But I also think that the wealth hoarding and the power hoarding of these billionaires needs to be broken up. So I think regulation, but also closing tax loopholes, for example. And another element of my suggestions include not allowing this labor segregation to go on. I mean, to continue to bar the majority of people from not only the skill set needed for leadership, but also for rising to other forms of leadership in society. And finally, I think I'm watching what the oligarchs are doing right now with the new Republican administration in the United States, and they are successfully getting more regulations rolled back, more protections for more vulnerable communities. And now they're starting to go after other countries that have stricter rules against how big tech corporations operate. So I think we need to follow the models of the EU and Brazil and start standing up and demanding that these companies are not only regulated but broken up. And I don't think these tech billionaires should have so much power over our social, cultural, economic lives and political lives.
Thank you so much, Coleen. Julie, do you want to jump in on this?
Yes, I wanted to, there was one aspect that I wanted to discuss. So, about deep fakes, I wanted to get back to that. I also wanted to show how much even government authorities can learn and inspire themselves when thinking about technology platforms and specifically the issues around content moderation. And I'm thinking about the deepfake issue, which the board, as I gave an example in my keynote, the board made a decision about deepfake cases in 2024. Now we're seeing more governments also asking for technology companies to take more seriously this problem, which I think is an important step. And I guess what I wanted to say is that there's a lot of learning from the oversight board decision, because these decisions are informed not just by us, my ideas about what should be done with regard to deepfakes, but really are informed by engagement. And as I was mentioning, the feature, the public comment feature, the engagement really that we do with civil society organizations, with including feminist civil society organizations, but also beyond academic research institutions, and as I was mentioning, international organization working on specific issues. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise. So now we have a lot of questions in the Q&A and only 5 minutes to end the session. I would just start with Paloma, who sent the first question. Paloma Vieiro Otero, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, from University of Bremen, and the Platform Governance Lab, is asking Coleen to talk more about the tech persisters idea, the concept that you're developing in your new book. So Coleen, if you could just give a brief explanation about this concept and illuminate for us what are you talking about in your book, just really quick, if possible.
It's a frame that I used near the end of my book when my editor in my editorial critiques were saying I wasn't making a global systemic critique enough, because my entire ethnography was a really deep dive into these tech persisters, people who have dedicated their lives, a lot of money, and contributing their talent and vision to these big tech corporations. So if you want to learn more about these tech persisters, I recommend reading my first book, Cracking the Bro Code. It's currently available. And you'll find a variety of experiences, but the commonality is that there's certain types of gender violence and racialized gender violence that's being targeted at these people, and they're still persisting despite this, and they're collectivizing. most of the people I talk to in Cracking the Bro Code are joined professional organizations for marginalized groups, and they're fighting back. But the critique that I received from about this book is that it limits me to be able to by being so grounded in these tech persisters experience, it's more reformist rather than overturning some of the larger structural problems that are hurting society. So that's really what motivated my next book. And I just thought because I'm a tech defector myself, and I follow a lot of, like, for example, Dr. Timit Gabru left big tech, started her own nonprofit to be concerned, they're concerned with social justice and environmental causes that relate to the power that data centers use. So I really want the people that I've been I'm not a tech persister, but I've been in the cultures of tech persisters. I've studied it for over 15 years. But I also want to make a large global systematic critique of how big tech operates. So I think these tech persisters also need to join with these tech defectors. And there's tension there. A lot of tech persisters say, well, people from outside don't know what we're going through. They'll just come in, make some critiques, and then leave us to clean up the mess. So there's this tension between the outsiders and the insiders. And I want that tension to dissolve so we can have a large, broad coalition to fight these oligarchs.
Thank you so much, Coleen. My apologies. I said that we only had 5 minutes, but we actually have more 15. The blame is on the moderator because we are organizing this in different time zones. So I checked like in my current time zone. We are going to get another question here from the audience from André Leal Sobral, who is also a postdoctoral fellow at the DTD lab. So question for both of our speakers, Coleen and Julie. To what extent do you believe that the state should play a role in regulating tech companies? So are you aware of other countries that are succeeding in regulating platforms and to implement and foster a safer and more inclusive online environment for women? Who want to jump in this question first? Julie, do you want to go first?
Yes,
Okay.
sure. So to respond to that question, I think it's also it's worth mentioning that honestly, we should also be wary. The answer is in the middle, okay? Praising government regulation without specifying the caveats of that, because they are real caveats. Some governments in the world use tech regulation against platform to silence voices they disagree with. They use that to shut down access to internet, saying that the internet is full of bad things. So we want to be mindful and wary of this as well. So what to do? I think the answer is really I use this term a lot, multi-stakeholder approach. No one has the single answer. Governments do not have the single answer, and I wouldn't trust one single component of society to come up with complex solutions. And so having civil society organizations at the table, including the very publics impacted by the issues that we're trying to address, remains critical and necessary. Otherwise, we risk coming up with regulation that, instead of fostering democracy, is actually further endangering it. I hope we can have a critical conversation about fake news laws. Really, historically, we as civil society organization need to be able, and I'm trying to force this on myself as well, need to be able to be honest and ask, was this the right thing to do 8 years ago? Focus on fake news, on adopting laws that purport to fight fake news. I'm hoping we can open this conversation. With that being said, yes, it's everybody's roles really to help regulate platform and ensure there is a democratic governance, not just the tech companies themselves, not just the governments, but really everyone involved, including the civil society organizations and publics affected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Coleen?
I don't think I can say this as eloquently as Julie just did. I do agree that if a state is going to protect its constituents, that, like Julie said, civil society organizations have to be at that table to advocate for the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. But I do think we do need to hold these companies accountable. I think the terms and conditions that California passed a law trying to make sure that we're not surveilled as much and we have to opt into consent. And then the European Union is also doing that as well. That makes me just personally feel better because I don't like being coerced into giving up my data and being surveilled. But we have to do it in order for our work, in order to even hold a job these days. So I would like, states to protect their most vulnerable constituents and including the people who work for big tech as well. I think the non-disclosure agreements that a lot of tech workers have to sign keep a lot of the secrets and the violence from the public view. And even when things do bubble up to the public view, when say whistleblowers like Frances Hagan, Susan Fowler come forward with a lot of what's happening in the workplaces here and how these companies know that they're harming young women, know that they're harming their workers, and do it anyway. Doesn't seem like there's any backlash against them. So that really makes me fearful. So I would like to see when we do know, I'd like to see NDAs go away. I'd like to see the state and big tech divest from Wall Street and the big tech stop collaborating with the NSA, the CIA, and other military operations. And I think they should pay their taxes. And I do think I totally agree with Julie that civil society organizations have to guide states to protect their constituents.
Thank you so much, Coleen. I think this point on the NDAs is really important that countries advance laws on this, like forbidding the companies to make the workers sign this NDA, especially when we're talking about content moderation that is quite an exhaustive and abusive that the workers they suffer a lot with this job. So moving to another question, I think we have time to answer at least one more of the questions posed here by the audience. So a question by Ashnish Sengupta. Does gender diversity on technology development teams overcome other organization and influences? Are women as individual employees in tech companies forced to conform to a particular culture and values of the organization through compensation and incentive systems rather than producing more equitable outcomes? So thank you so much for this question, Ushnish. I think it's a really important topic for us to address. Julie, do you want to go first, and then we move to Coleen, and we can finish the webinar with Jess' final remarks as well.
Sure. Really, I love this question. I've never worked in tech. I'd rather say this up front, but when I joined the board, I think, and it speaks to what Coleen was eloquently saying earlier about it was a humility exercise for me to meet with the people working behind the scenes and realize that no, these are not people who want to dismantle democracy. These are really genuinely people who are genuinely caring about the promises, right, of the technology and the different platforms that people are on. So that being said, what I cannot speak to what they're facing because I've never been working in those trenches with them. But what I can say is, yes, there is a lot of goodwill, but that collaboration that Coleen rightly talked about, and which I also include in the multi-stakeholder approach that I call for, is extremely instrumental in making sure that the messages go both ways. We can tell the tech companies what we want to see, and they in turn can tell us what is difficult, and especially people working on the specific issues that we're trying to address. My organization sent me to this region to understand that when we are 12,000 kilometers away in France, How do I know as a civil society? I didn't know, honestly, and I'll be very vulnerable here. I did not know the difference between product team, policy team, cross-functional. These are terms that I learned. And when I understood them better, I can then tailor my advocacy and speak the language of the people in the different teams that I want to speak to. And in turn, they can also share with me, when possible, the limitations that they're facing. And we can then use our voices, and we have less restrictions. We can speak and advocate more with less strings. We can advocate more for what we want to see. So these collaborations are important, but it's also important to speak the same language. So it's important for us, civil society organization, to understand the structure of the tech companies, and it's important for the tech companies to understand also the limitations that we're facing. Right? We have less funding. It's becoming very difficult to do advocacy work, quite frankly, especially when we work about on the very issues that we're discussing. And I think one question asked that. So yeah, understanding and humility on the both sides will allow us to collaborate genuinely to make sure we have the safe digital world and feminist online world that we want and think is important for everyone.
Thank you so much, Julie. Coleen?
Yes, I just want to say thank you for this question, because it's especially as women as individual employees forced to conform. It's something I think about all the time. I think there are women leaders occasionally in middle management. Not very often do they break through the glass ceiling into the C-suites. About one or two of the leaders of boards in the top 500 tech companies are women. But the middle managers are still tokenized. So you can have a women leader, but not a critical mass of women leadership in the ranks of these big tech companies. And that critical mass would actually start to change the culture in terms of the gender hostility. To the point of the question about, do women as individuals have to conform? Absolutely. And this is a chapter in my book that I called Perverted Injustice. So anybody who starts to criticize either the culture of the workplace itself or the products that are the output of this workforce, they're often purged. This is why harassment is not only tolerated, but it's often just par for the course in these institutions, because people need to be purged if they're not towing the line. So I've seen some tech journalists even call working for tech kind of like cultish, and I experienced that myself, and can report back on that. So I have a whole chapter that answers this question in my next book, that not only the perverted injustice piece means not only are these people silenced and then harassed and hopefully and sometimes retaliated against by being fired, but then the space in which they have been silenced, the space in which the silence exists, is then papered over or doctored over with the party line. So, for example, Dr. Timnit Gebru made this environmental critique of Google's products and the culture of Google, and then was fired. But then what the public was told from Google was that she quit. So there was a lie that it filled the space of what happened in the silence of her being ousted. So it's very dangerous to speak up against your bosses in high tech. And this is why we need tech defectors to really share with the public and even break their NDAs to tell people what's really going on behind the scenes here and the harms that are being caused not only to employees, but by the work that's being disseminated so broadly throughout our world.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Coleen. Thank you, Julie, also for being here with us today. So I'm moving forward now to Jess, that's going to end our webinar. Thank you so much once again for being with us today. It was a pleasure moderating this discussion and learning a lot with Coleen Carrigan and Julie Owonu. And thank you all, the audience as well, for the questions that you posed here. The questions that were not picked up by me will probably be addressed in the report that we are publishing in January. So thank you also for sending them to us. despite they are not being answered here today, we're going to try to address them later on the report. Thank you once again. See you next.
So, hi, thank you so much, Julie and Coleen and Yasmin, for this fantastic discussion. I think one of the greatest privileges of co-organizing this webinar series is that we can learn so much from you and with you. So I truly appreciate your time and your energy and the expertise that you shared today. And as Yasmin said, we collected the questions we could not answer. We'll try to answer them in the report. And I really invite everyone to join us on September 29th for the next webinar on environmental justice and technology. We have two amazing speakers as well. And Amy will share the link to subscribe to our newsletter. So please do so if you want to learn more about like upcoming events and publications and everything else. So thanks very much again. Have a nice day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.